Hello, my friends. It is I, Rich Alberto, DM Philly, out here on the internet, your friendly neighborhood podcaster, back with you again, and very excited to be talking about the season finale of season 2 of House of the Dragon, episode 8, The Queen That Ever Was. I am very grateful to be joined today by the Queen That Ever Was of our Westerosi podcast here at Screen and Page, the one and only LaTonya Starks. LT, how are you?
I'm doing really good. I am also going through the valley in search of a dragon, and I'm sure that in 2 years' time, that story will be resolved in my favor.
A controversial finale. We will talk about all of it, of course. I hope that you brought more food and water with you into that valley than our erstwhile princess, who seemed to
None.
overlook some survival supplies, but nevertheless, there be dragons in them hills. Before I forget, this is Screen and Page Podcast. If you're listening to us and you're not currently subscribed, you should subscribe to us on whatever podcast player of choice you use. Ratings and reviews, always really appreciated. These podcasts are up over on YouTube if you want to come see me occasionally pick up my cat and hang out with us in video chat. All of the Acolyte coverage with Taylor Ball is over there as well, at Screen Page Pod, or all of our social medias. And there's a link tree in those social medias to the Discord that'll bring you right into the Screen and Page Discord to hang out with us. LaTonya, it was a finale. There's a lot of mixed feelings out there on the internet. Before we get into the specifics to really unpack this thing, how you feeling about the end of season 2 of Hot D?
You know, I like trailers. I always get to the movie theater ahead of time so that I can watch the trailer for trailers for upcoming films. And I feel like this was an excellent trailer for season 3, but just the most confounding, like ridiculous season finale ever. I never thought that I would say this about House of the Dragon because I always want more of it, but they could have ended it at last week's episode and I would have been happy.
I very much agree. I mean, I think that this is the big talking point coming out of the finale this week. Is I think a lot of people are saying that was a great episode of television and that was a terrible finale for the season of TV that is not going to be back on our screens for 2 years. I think that element, once upon a time, Game of Thrones was back every summer, every year like clockwork, and we could count on it. And as it got bigger and the production got more involved and the CGI got more kind of present in every scene, that rate of production slowed down. And so I think knowing that we're going to sit here for years, for long enough to forget most of what happened before we come back to season 3, makes this a little bit of a jagged pill to swallow. I think it's worth noting, just in some of the kind of discourse that's come out since the finale, according to the word on the street, the showrunners thought they had a 10 episode season. And about a month before production started, the executives came to them and were like, actually just 8 episodes. And then a writer's strike happened. And so they were unable to. Part of what occurred during the writer's strike is they were able to go into production on a lot of these projects, but the writing staff could not be working on the scripts while we were in production. So it seems counterintuitive sometimes the ways that a lot of these things are being worked on up until the final second, but losing the ability to adjust the script once they went into production with the truncated season supposedly gets us what we got, which is that this is episode 8 of what should have been a 10 episode season of TV. And I think that you're spot on. The reality is that in retrospect, this is a really hard landing spot, I think, for a lot of the audience, especially the more casual folks than you and I that are hanging out every week to do some like extra homework about Hot D. And they probably should have just ended after 7 and walked away and called it a day.
I mean, how great of an ending would it have been to just see I almost called her Daenerys because we saw Daenerys in this episode.
Yeah, I think that's
just see Rhaenyra standing at Dragonstone, flanked by 3 dragons that are all roaring as one, as her father once said. Like, that would have been such a cool. And then, like, Aemond turning tail like the coward that he is. That have been a great way, a triumphant way even, to end the season. But instead, we got introduced to an entire new character, and his, because they use his
Mhm, mhm.
in the show, and like his surroundings in terms of the triarchy, um saw an almost claiming of a dragon, maybe. And why does Rhaenys dragon have to be that ugly? Like, why is it the ugliest possible dragon?
It's a shame. Sheepstealer, notably referred to in the books as brown and a very ugly dragon. This like dragon the color of mud. I thought Sheepstealer actually looked stunning. I was like, that's a really imposing looking dragon. I
It
love
is
his
imposing
crazy
looking.
wing fingers and his kind of different shaped head. I worked in the reptile house at the Brock Zoo, and it reminded me of like this
Oh,
very specific turtle type of head of the Mata Mata snapping turtle. And I was like, I don't know, it looks pretty cool to me. But you're getting at what I think a lot of people were feeling. What really shocked me, LT, in like my DMs after this episode, the amount of folks in my life that I didn't expect to know what edging was that were like, oh my God. So it was 8 episodes of edging. That's what we did. We just edged all, and I'm like, oh my God. But we kind of did. And I think it's the distinction between good cliffhanger, bad cliffhanger. Condell's been on record. A lot of the staff have been talking about it, but this ultimately, they don't want House of the Dragon to be a show about the big spectacles. They want it to be about the characters, and they want it to be a character drama and character driven. And I think that it very fully is. But that being said, while we had so many like magnificent moments across this episode, there was some stunning acting across the ensemble. I think it was some of the most beautiful cinematography we've ever seen in Game of Thrones. Ramin Djawadi is just killing it as usual.
so good.
And this has just ended at the most frustrating place possible, where I think that you're spot on. It would have felt like a more victorious, triumphant, exciting cliffhanger to leave at the end of last week and be like, oh my God, what are they going to do with all those dragons now? Right.
Yeah.
And it's perplexing. I think it creates a really unfortunate situation where the creatives are going to eat a lot of shit for this decision. And I think it's ultimately the choice of the executives. But I think that like you got to know in 2024 that this is going to infuriate your audience.
Yeah. I mean, best trailer since Suicide Squad.
For
But
real.
but still, I there are just so many things that are perplexing to me about this episode of television. And so many things that I wanted to love and enjoy. But then, you know, in the back of my mind, I'm always going to like I'm only human. So I'm always going to compare this show to what came before
How
it in
can we
terms
not?
of Game of Thrones. And it reminded me of like later seasons of Game of Thrones where there were just episodes that I was like, okay, I guess that happened. But those weren't season finales. Like I expect so much more out of season finales from this show, from Game of Thrones, the Game of Thrones universe. And
Mhm.
it just did not deliver for me. And I think for the first time in the entire run of this season, I was disappointed at the end
I
of its run. And that's not how I want to leave off, knowing that it's going to be at least 2 years before we see any of these people again.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really fair take, and I do think that the whole nature of the release schedule is a very important part of it in a world where, like, okay, in 8 months, in 10 months, in 11 months, we'll be back. It doesn't feel as agonizing, but I think that we've become accustomed to this culture where by the time the new season comes back, you got to go rewatch the whole show because it has been
Yeah.
so long since we've been with these characters in that way. So it's certainly interesting. Perplexing, I think, is a pretty poignant word. It's certainly a feeling I had. I enjoyed a lot of this, but there
Yeah.
was an element of frustration. Let's get into it, the specifics. One of these new characters, that this is the beginning of the head scratching, that in the finale episode, I love Essos, and I really love weirdo pirates. I love the Lysini with their blue dyed beards. This is a real homage to Dario Naharis in the books with this blue dyed beard. I love this. I love Captain Lohar. I love everything we get with Tywin Lannister. I'm sorry, Tywin. I'm sorry, Tyrod. Mud wrestling and, and Lohar's.
Such a power play. I don't know your name. What's your name?
It's so tremendous. And even the whole note of the gendering of Lohar, of this was a male character in the books that's relatively minor. It's being kind of converged with another male character, Ricalio Rendoon. We do the gender swap.
What a name.
I know, it's a great name, right? All of these pirates have the best names, LT.
What was it again?
Ricalio Rendoon.
I want a cat named Ricalio now.
That's pretty good, honestly. It's on my short list, right there with Rodolai Chiralda. But so this is Captain Lohar, and you know that they gender her as he. There's a couple of points where she is addressed as he, but she genders herself as she within the show. And so Condell just talked about it a little bit. And this show that is so playing with like gender norms and stereotypes, to have this really powerful badass woman in a patriarchal system, in a very patriarchal role, and the fact that the triarchy, the rest of these guys, ultimately, like he talked about her playing into the David Bowie androgyny space of like, okay, sure, I'll be he. Like I could just be he, and if that will denote more respect from all of you, and that makes it easier for all of you to wrap your head around me being your pirate captain, then that's what I'll do. But it's certainly a commentary on pronouns in the 21st century, and I found it so interesting, if slightly perplexing, that why are we doing this?
Also being played by a trans woman.
Yes.
So that's awesome.
Is a YouTuber, philosophy tube, right?
Yeah. I mean, hire more YouTubers, right? They don't have enough money. Hire us.
Yeah, I have a short list of YouTubers. Would be great. We'd be great pirates. I'll dye my beard blue.
I'll grow a beard if necessary. Listen, I am unemployed.
How did
Please hire me.
This work for you? Just to like, we could kind of compartmentalize this whole story, right? If we remember, Aemon sent Tyland off to go kind of rally the triarchy to see if they could make this alliance. Part of the deal here is we're going to use the triarchy ships to break the blockade in the Gullet so we can get some food in the King's Landing, deal with the Valerian fleet. It's a little bit of like addressing the moving pieces of the war, but also, like I've noted, we are really missing comedy and lighthearted characters in House of the Dragon. Right. And it just felt like a very kind of unexpected injection of levity that I don't know that I was looking for in the final episode. But how did this whole like Tyrod Lohar story play for you in the end?
Yes, it was funny. And we did just have a discussion last week about how we wanted more funny in House of the Dragon, but not right now. Not at this moment. Like this is the moment where everything is rightly tense, and I do not need a mud wrestling scene in the final episode of House of the Dragon. Like it's just so confusing. Like, what do you mean we're being introduced to the triarchy in the last episode of the season? What do you mean we're gonna take time to show them mud wrestling each other and pretending to invite him over to eat human flesh? What do you mean he's got to sing a sea shanty before you give him the... What do you mean? I have not been so confused by something since I'd learned anything about RFK Jr.
It's so funny because I was going to say, it sounds a lot like he could have been like an independent presidential candidate from that description right there, as he left any bear cubs and unassuming parks at King's Landing. It just, the whole thing sent me. And there's
like, where did he get a bear? Like, I need someone to explain this to me like I'm a 2-year-old. I'm just so confused.
It's a whole separate podcast series we could do maybe post-election when we're all in a better space.
Yeah.
You know? We get to like reflect, but like that's its own entire series right there. He was out falconing with his friends, you know? These things
of course
will happen. They'll happen out there. Upstate New York.
Tell you how many times I'm out falconing with my friends when I kill a bear.
You and me both. The whole introduction of this storyline, again, like, I can see it as an episode 8 in a 10-episode season where let's introduce these new
Yeah.
characters, let's set this up, let's remind you of this important element to the battle or to the upcoming conflict and this important player in the military conflict, and then we can come back to a season 3 to reset it, but it just feels so incongruous and tonally compared to the maybe overinflated sense of importance and gravitas. Like, this is an episode of House of the Dragon that took itself very seriously everywhere that we were
Mhm.
not mud wrestling, LT. You know, it's
Do you
like,
know what? Do you know what I think happened? For those of you all just listening, I'm picking up my phone here as if I'm on a phone call. Hey,
yes.
can we possibly move all of this pirate stuff to next season when it might be more palatable? Oh, we already paid them. Okay, shit. All right, just throw it in. Throw it in. Like, what?
I feel you. It is very what I did think that it mostly played funny. I do like Tywin Lannister being like set upon in this way. It reminded me of some of like Tyrion's kind of later story in Game of Thrones, where like
Mhm.
he's riding pigs while he's like traveling on his way to Marine. It gets very kind of zany in the books, and there is a little bit of this like tradition of like the zany Lannister adventure. You know, his brother Jason is like marching to war with lions and cages, like the real serious Lannister. You know, he's like the Jamie in this relationship. And then we have poor Tyland, who's got to go deal with like the pirate ambassadors. It was funny, but it was a little insane that this is present during all of this. And like, it's here, you know. I love Lohar. I appreciate the gender swap. I think it's an interesting setup. And I guess we'll see where it goes in a couple of years. Cut to Aemond and Vagar, and they are real man, LT. That like incredible eagle-eyed vision that he had to be able to spot those dragons at the end of the episode last week. He is salty. And so apparently it's time to do some war crimes. Let's us burn some civilians.
Yes, that is just how you blow off steam in Westeros when you have a dragon. So I the part of me that is Team Black is just like terrible, reprehensible, should not be allowed to continue. We have to
Mhm.
kill this man. We have to take him off the board. But the part of me who is like basically obsessed with Ewan Mitchell and what he's been doing with this character
Yeah.
is like amazing. Give me 14 of them right now. What's in it? I don't want to know. Like I just how great is it to just be like, I'm pissed off at my sister, so I am going to burn an entire city to the ground.
I really love it, and I saw a lot of people talking about the dragon CGI. I've been applauding it because I think they're getting in so much detail work that I really lamented not being present in the days of Game of Thrones. And there's the point where they're flying down, and Ewan Mitchell is absolutely killing it as this character. A lot of the characters have been meaningfully changed for this adaptation.
Mhm.
Aemond feels like one to one. Like, this is the character that has just stepped right out of the book, and I love it, and I love his performance so much. But as they're flying down, there's the point where we get like a close-up of Vagar's eye as the fire is kind of broiling up in her throat, and she looks happy, LT.
She looks so
She looks
happy.
thrilled to be out here burning innocents by the thousands. And there is this kind of perpetual question from like the deep GRM nerds of like, how much does the dragon's personality influence the writer, right? Like,
Mm.
Aemond was not this crazed, was not this guy before Vagar. And there's that eternal like nurture versus nature bit, but like, it's a really interesting question to me, you know?
Technically, yes, this happens at AV after Vagar,
Sure, sure,
but
sure.
he does threaten to burn Lucerys in the fire, just like his dog. You'll die screaming like your father did. He tells him
Fair
before he
point.
like almost hits him in the head with a rock.
Fair
As a
point.
child,
It's
like
a very fair point. I I may be reflecting too positively. I just feel like compared to his brother, he was always the better
Yeah.
pairing,
Yeah.
right? Aegon was like so easily relatable. So let's talk about his brother. We get this great scene, Aegon talking to Orwell of like, Orwell, you're a good man. Poor Mr. Orwell. This poor guy is just beset upon on every side as he's like wrapping the king in cabbage again this week. But here comes Laris, and he's like, all right, we gotta go. We got to get out of here. And
Yeah.
Aegon, he's telling him the whole plan. And Aegon responding, she really did it. What was the point in all of this then? I'm the king. Why would I run? As Laris is like, we got to get out of here. And I love Laris's response. Why? I'm the king. Why must I run? And Laris says, the Prince Regent is going to kill you. You were in danger before, and now he's been thwarted and he's been angry. Aegon's like, okay, we'll throw him in jail. And then he's like, yeah. And then what happens when your sister gets here with the 7 dragons and Vagar's off the board? Like, we got to roll out. I'm going to take you to Essos. I got all my strong savings in the Iron Bank. It's going to be great. We'll live like kings. You'll come back. You'll be Aegon the builder, the peacemaker. And Aegon gets excited, LT. He's going to be the realm's delight. How did this work for you?
Dude, your penis burned off.
Like a sausage. How visceral.
How great. Honestly, if that could happen to every person who committed sexual assault, then I think the world would be a better place. I didn't say that on a podcast.
It really, it ended up being so poignant because when his jerk off buddies were giving him sober cats earlier this season, and they're like, Aegon the Dragon Cock. And it's just like, oh my God, for like King Dragon Cock to lose both his dragon, and it's just so good. It's such like Theon Greyjoy kind of punishment.
Yeah.
Theon got it probably worse than he deserved, but yes.
Yeah, he got, I think, a lot worse than he deserved, especially because he didn't really kill any Starks. But the subtext of everything that Laris said was the sentence ended in dummy. Like, what about when your sister comes here with her 7 dragons, dummy? Without Vagar, what are you gonna do, dummy? Like, this man is a child. Like, these are all children, which I think is so eloquently done in this show to just show. I mean, a couple episodes ago, we even have Alicent asking Aemond if the things that he experienced as a child have been avenged yet. Like, these are all like, these are stunted children, with perhaps the exception being Helena, who is just fully realized in her like green seeing abilities.
Quite possibly like my new favorite character on House of the Dragon,
Right?
full stop, period. I love Helena so much, and knowing like how this story goes, I'm just like, oh man, like I love Helena. She's just great. I love this whole interpretation that Pia Saban is giving to her. Performance is incredible for somebody that's not as present as some of the bigger characters. Preach.
Yeah, but like, Aegon is just, all you have to do is appeal to his ego. Like, even when he is essentially on his deathbed, all you have to do is appeal to his ego, and he will go along with whatever you say. And Laris gets the amazing win of getting to abscond with a king, which is wild.
It's quite a move, I mean, it's like shades of Illyrio Mapatus in the beginning of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Like, he's going to run off with this Targaryen, and how will it play? It'll be really interesting to see coming forward. It's especially complicated by the kind of final moments between Alicent and Rhaenyra that we get later. But I really, I love so much of what's going on here, because you talk about, they are children, and there is that like unspoken dummy in every line that Laris is giving to him. But there is the notion that like they are just these sad, damaged people, right? Aegon is this unloved child. Like, we didn't emphasize it as much on the show as I think they do in the book, but the Realm's Delight was Rhaenyra's moniker as a child.
Right.
She was this beloved princess of the realm. The small folk delighted in their princess in the same way that Viserys does. And that may sound alien, but I mean, there's a lot of folks who track very closely on like the royals of our real world in that way. And some are popular.
Princess Diana.
Exactly. And some are not. And so it's really powerful to hear him articulate that he wants that that moniker that his sister had, that love, that approval. It's a really strong element. It's something that Viserys in Game of Thrones talked about in relationship to Daenerys. Nobody has ever looked at me the way that they look at her after
Mm.
she marries the Khal, and all of the Dothraki are kind of fawning over her as their Khaleesi. That need for approval, it really like gets down to it. And in the same way that Aemond is still this bitter, petulant boy who's like angry for all these wrongs against him, they really are just these children in their arrested development with an ungodly amount of power at their beck and call
So much power.
between like the state and the dragons, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we get definitively in this episode, for anyone who was still wondering, that Aegon's dragon is dead, which is interesting in and of itself.
Sunfire down.
Yeah. So they really just have Vhagar, because Dreamfire, as we will learn later, is not going to be participating in this. Not by Helena's own will, anyway. So what else did they really have other than Daeron's dragon, who is very young,
Mhm.
as is Daeron, who's like untested in battle. So it's really interesting for them to talk, for them to do dragon math on the show. I find it's always interesting when they do that, but it really speaks to Larys's abilities as a master manipulator and a master of whispers, to be able to manipulate
Mhm.
a king in this way, and appeal to his vanity, even though he's just recovering from the first attempt on his life made by his brother, is great. And like, Tom Glencarney does such an amazing job with this role,
Tremendous. Yeah.
and just the way, like, I do not like Aegon. I hate Aegon. But like, the things that he's done, and being so pitiful, especially after his son's death, and like now after his almost death, it's just amazing acting. Like, you shouldn't identify with a character like that who has done the things that he has done in the past, but you do. And like, that speaks, I think, to his performance more than anything else.
Yeah, it's really well said. I mean, as much as I really do love Ewan Mitchell, and I love Matt Smith as Damon, but like, these are almost easier characters to play than an Aegon, who is so much more complex and pitiful and doesn't have these kind of virtuous heroic traits. I know that Aemon and Daeron are not heroes, but they're anti-heroes in the way that they still embody a lot of these very traditional masculine badassery traits, right?
Hmm.
And I'm with you there. Tom Glencarry really carrying, and it's so easy to get lost underneath the prosthetics and the makeup and have scenes like that play a little bit corny,
Right, right.
like it's that extra like barrier between the performance that it really struck me. And I love everything with Laris. He's just such an interesting character in his ability to kind of recognize that this is a pliable king. This is an opportunity. He's never going to climb any higher than he is if Aemond maintains the control that he has. So we cut to Rhaena, who is just kind of running through the Vale wildly. I feel like they did Rhaena dirty here, LT. They did
They
not do
did.
any favors to depict this woman as at all like savvy, capable, or intelligent. They basically made her look like a very like spoiled rich girl who decides she's going to like run off into the woods and adopt the local dragon, and is completely ill-equipped for this. Justice for Rhaena.
Yeah, she didn't take any food with her, no water. She was so excited to see that stream. You would thought that she had found the dragon at that point. Like, I realized that she is a rich girl, and she is someone who is used to having things done for her, but she surely knows that without a retinue, or even like a single protector, that, first of all, retinue is such a great word.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they started using it, so that I can use it. But without a retinue or like a protector, she knew that she would have nothing out there. She's shivering in the cold, trying to sleep. She's running like the length and width of, that land, to try to find this dragon in the cold. Like, it even looks cold.
Yeah.
And she is just, she's like broken her shoe in the process. It's just all bad. I don't understand why they would make her go through all of this to get a dragon when she is a Targaryen. And I know that she's tried to claim dragons in the past and it hasn't gone her way. But like to do it like this, you would think that they would have sent a search party or something for her by then.
It's insane. These are the little things that I think when they have Martin's writing to build off of, there's always the extra detail that like you can tell that these are changes just because of kind of how irrational some of this stuff is. Like the fact that we don't see even one shot of like what happened to Rhaena, nobody seems concerned at all that she's gone. We don't ever go back to the retinue that she doesn't have like a blanket, a water skin, like a couple of crackers. She couldn't like brought some falafel with anything, man. There's just like it's insane. And I feel like I can only say so much knowing where we're going. I think that it's building to a really interesting point. I really kind of like the choice, but I don't think they did a great job framing these scenes in a way to make her seem impressive or capable. I think that like they quietly diminished Rhaena without intending to,
Yeah,
and I
they
was
definitely.
very aggravated by it.
I've been a fan of her storyline this whole season, honestly. Like, I mean, it's annoying the way Rhaenyra kind of sends her off to almost be like the mammy figure for these two like highborn little blonde boys.
Well, and it like validates her fears, right? That like I don't have a dragon, I'm not as important as the rest of you. And it's like, yeah, you don't have a dragon. Go be the babysitter.
Right. Yeah, it completely validates her fears. And Jane was just terrible to her the entire time that she was there. Treated her like a burden and was happy when she left. But the idea that she's supposed to get on a ship with those two princes and she's not there, you would think that someone would have sent a party out looking for her or gone back to check Jane's castle to be like, did she come back? Like, what's happening?
I'm
No one
sure.
even seems to care about her.
No, not at all. I'm sure we'll address it in 2 years when we come back. The like glow up for Rhaena feels really kind of good, giving her a more aggressive story because this nature of like her sister has a dragon and she does not. It's very relevant in the text, but it's kind of approached in a different way. But Lady Jane becoming this kind of dark character in her story is a bit of a pivot. Jane is kind of a fan favorite from the books, but the thing that I think it's
That's what
easy
I
to
thought.
forget, and the show doesn't do a great job reminding us of things sometimes, but like part of why Jane is being so horrible to this girl is that Jane was like good friends with Rhea Royce, who is Damon's ex-wife that
Yeah.
got murdered on a horse accident. And Jane is very much like, yeah, your father killed my friend. I'm not that into you. Get out of here. But I didn't love the depiction of Jane of the Vale. To flip it over to somebody else who's having all of their fears validated and maybe not showing their best self anymore. Young Prince Jacaerys Valerian. He comes walking into the map room and here's Ulf Desat with his feet up on the table. And Hugh is like, buddy, you got to stop. It's the prince. And this whole beat between them, Ulf's whole reaction, the like, this is Prince Jacaerys Valerian. And as he jumps up, the hug, LT, look at that hair, as dark as they say. Let them tell us we don't have Targaryen blood. These two, like, I really loved it. I kind of love like Ulf as this like drunken elephant just crashing through the china shop of Dragonstone.
The way that Ulf was this entire episode, I was like, take away his dragon. Send him back to where he came from. Are you joking? Like, this is how you're going to act? Like, oh, where'd he come from? He lives here. He's the queen's son. Like, what are you doing? It also really reminded me of like how Shiv got pissed at Kendall when he put his feet up on the desk in Succession.
Oh yes. Oh my god, it really is. It's brutal. That's so brutal. R.I.P. Kendall. Oh.
But in this case, Ulf still gets to sit at the table with the queen and request more birds, and no one does anything to him. Like, the idea that he hasn't had his tongue removed by now is wild. You can't take Ulf anywhere. Can't take him
No.
anywhere.
You really can't. So it's kind of interesting. This whole thing with like the hair in the books, he's literally called Ulf the White because he has
Mhm.
this white hair. So I think the choice to really connect them in that way feels powerful. And it's bringing out just the worst in Jace, who had this whole idea to begin with. And now it's gotten completely kind of carried away and slid away from him. And Tom Bennett playing Ulf, like, I'm so in on this guy, LT. He was talking about that scene with the little birds, and I think he ate like 20 or 25 quail that day. He's just like, some days you realize you're getting paid for eating little birds, And like, he's just so wonderful as he's talking about Silverwing. Like, Silverwing is like, an old dragon, the
Yeah.
good Queen Alice age dragon. And just Tom Glencarry, the actor, talking about it like she's a posh lady. Sometimes a posh lady likes a bit of a rough and tumble from the streets, that whole relationship between them. But Ulf, how did this work for you? Did this feel like a real pivot, like too far, too fast?
I I actually don't think um that Jace is behaving the worst. Like, I think that it's completely valid the way that he's behaving. Like, you bring in these people who are no one, essentially, and they claim a dragon. And now they think because they've claimed a dragon, they're like, oh, well, she needs us. The queen needs us. Like, she couldn't possibly hurt me now. So they just get to disrespect the institution, the family, the other people that were there before who are actually highborn
Mhm.
is ridiculous. And Jace rightly is just like, I should have you whipped and like paraded through the streets. Are you kidding me? You don't even belong here. You are a guest. Like, I last week I was like, Jace is kind of getting on my nerves. This was
Mhm.
his idea, and now he's like upset that his idea has taken root. But this week, with the way Ulf was behaving, I was just like, oh, I don't trust him. Like, I completely understand why Jace would act the way that he is acting, and I don't fault him for it because I don't trust Ulf.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong, I do think there's a reasonableness to it. This is part of one of the things I would have appreciated in this episode, like, is just some more time to deal with each of these guys as individuals. Like a scene of Rhaenyra talking to each one of these people one-on-one so we can really kind of like distinguish. The thing that's getting me with Jace is that, okay, so Ulf is clearly Ulfing, but Hugh is in the room like trying to be like, I'm sorry, Your Grace. Like he just does not know what he does. And then Adam is like the effing man, right? Like
Yeah,
these three people are not the same. And the fact that Jace is so quick to just kind of boil them all up, and Ulf is just kind of giving the worst representation of all of them, that Jace is going to paint them all with that brush. And it does really validate a lot of his fears in a way, but it's great setup as we're kind of like pushing forward. And I love how it sets up for later of Bela coming in on him like, what are you doing? Pouting. Stop effing pouting. I'm not pouting, I'm reading. And it's shades of the Hound in late Game of Thrones LT of like, your mouth is moving and you're whinging. You're complaining, you're whinging. Like, yes, you're pouting, Jace. Stop pouting. If you want to be like the heir to the realm, you want to be your the king, then like stand the F up and go stand next to your mother and like show them why you should own that place. You think you're the first noble boy that's not actually his father's son? Like, get
right.
over it, dude. I really
Yeah.
loved Bela challenging him in that way.
I love Bela has been gathering these men all season.
Oh, she's a legend. Yeah.
Like, she was just like in the council meeting, you're free to go attack them with your dragon. Oh wait, you don't have
She
one.
she
Then to
is a
her own
legend.
grandfather, she's like, I am fire and blood. I do not want your saltancy. Leave me alone. And to Jace, she's always acting as a therapist almost to him. She's always the one who is just like, did you forget that you came out of the queen? What is wrong with you? Here is and behind that is, imagine what I would do if that
Mhm.
was me. There would be no room for pouting. There would be no room for sitting around and feeling sorry for myself. You are the true heir to the seven kingdoms. So stand up. And again, annoying that Rhaena has to, or Bela has to be put into this position on a constant basis where all of her screen time is just gathering these people as opposed to building her own story.
Yeah, too true. I mean, I think that she is such an avatar for a lot of what we're talking about the ways that these men's impulses are leading to the worst possible outcomes. And these women are trying to rein them in left and right. Like, lest we forget, Bela also like running down Kristen Cole early in the season on Moondance or the David Bowie dragon. Like, Bela
So
is
good.
is a rock star. And I really love the way that she handles this petulant kid. Part of where I think the season has been hurting a little bit is that we're not really addressing the loss as we go. Like, has anybody even said Lucerys's name in the last 7 episodes? It's
No.
like Jace
Or Rhaenys.
articulating like yeah, exactly. But Jace articulating like the pain of like, I lost my brother, and here are these men in the seats that like he should have, and taking up this kind of place. Like, there's a lot of other unspoken emotional baggage that these people are dealing with that I feel like is not being addressed. But the Bela Jace relationship is just magnificent, where we've seen again and again in Westeros these terrible arranged marriages. And this one feels actually like, oh, this feels good.
It
Like,
feels great.
you two need each other.
Yeah. I don't know how it's going to end up. I'm guessing not well. But I love their relationship. And it is exactly the type of give and take that you need to have a successful marriage during that period of time, or just in general. All of their scenes together, I feel like they lift one another up
Oh, for real.
and they highlight all of the best parts of the other person.
If people have read Fire and Blood, they know, there's a huge section on Jaehaerys, the Old King, and good Queen Alysanne. And Alysanne was a very powerful queen who had a lot of influence on the realm. They ruled together, and it was almost like this paradigm shift. And Martin loves echoes. He's not quite George Lucas, but he does love it when it rhymes like poetry. And there is this kind of mirrored symmetry that we see in Bela and Jace's relationship to Jaehaerys and Alysanne, and I just love it. So Rhaenyra comes to Corlys on the docks and is going to ask about Adam, where she's just like, I don't know these guys, but I hear that you at least know Adam. And I love the line, I've had little to do with him to my regret. Corlys kind of acknowledging it. And he's going to do some quick dragon math. We're going to talk about Daeron, the young brother. He's not been tested. He's only 16. His dragon's small, but it's still flies. And like, don't forget about Dreamfire and Helena. You have to act. You cannot just sit around waiting and hoping that they're going to back off because you have dragons now. Corlys really giving Rhaenyra what she needs to kind of like shift gears and get things in motion.
Very much so. I think he's doing his job as hand very well. And finally, the ship is ready to go. And he's managed to rename it. I think it's very interesting when he says that all that he does now, he does for Rhaenys.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that with Corlys, it's all too little too late.
Mm-hmm.
Like he has a really hard time showing the people that he loves them when it's the right time. Like when Rhaenys was around, would have been a great time to name your ship the Queen Who Never Was, as opposed to naming it after yourself. And for him to say that he wishes that he had more time with Adam, you could have, sir,
mm-hmm.
as he is your son. Like, tell Rhaenyra that, maybe.
Too true. I mean, I think I saw, last week we have the moment where he's going to come to Adam and he meets him in his room and he gives him the little nod at the end of like, well done. And he leaves. And I just saw some folks talking about it, and somebody, I don't remember exactly who it was, it said, for a certain type of father, that's as close as you're ever going to get to, I love you and I'm proud of you.
Yeah, it
And
is.
God, that speaks so true to a lot of the men that I had in my life, not my dad in particular, but I know that, and that kind of repressed emotion. I think like so much of this show, it's talking about the patriarchy and the ways that it like represses women in culture. But I think that an unspoken part of that is the ways that we And some of it I think is even articulated through the Jace storyline of the way that we raise young men and like the expectations that we place on them of what your life's supposed to be and how you can be of value. I think we get a lot of it later from Kristen Cole kind of articulating it about, the recognition of the world not being this place you want it to be. I'm getting away from the point, but it's a really tremendous moment. And Corlys, like too little, too late, that should be his last name, not Valerian.
Seriously.
Yeah, for real. So Daemon is at Harrenhal. He's got his army. Caraxes loves pigs, so that's no problem that we're running out of sheep. I love that little
Same Caraxes.
You and me both, Caraxes. I'll pass on the mutton. Give me that bacon.
Yeah.
So here comes Sir Alfred Broom. He has finally showed up, which I think is a little bit of a reminder that like part of this whole season is the build up to war. Part of what Ryan Condal talked about is like, it's not like the king declares war and the Black Hawk helicopters go flying out of King's Landing. Like we got to get things moving. And in a medieval setting, this is a slow process. But Alfred Broom's finally gotten here and he's going to come to talk to crazy zany Uncle Daemon. And then we hear the wind, traitor. Did you love this? Or is this like a little too cheesy?
Honestly, when it comes to Harrenhal, it's like, why not?
I know.
What? After all that we've seen of what's happened to Daemon in Harrenhal, having something whisper traitor is probably the least of your worries. So I'm on board for this. Because he is being a traitor. Like, just the idea, like, okay, we've done enough of this. What we really need now as a man is awful. It's absolutely terrible. And at this point, Daemon doesn't rebuff this in any way. So he feels complete. And his last name is Broom. You have to think, because like these names come from people who, they used to be called like what they did. So you have to think that like someone in his ancestry was like sweeping up and then did a really cool thing with a broom and was elevated.
Yep.
He killed someone with a broom and was then elevated. But like for him to come in and be like, I've traveled long and far to be here. You should be the one in charge. Yeah, you're a traitor. And if Daemon is good on his word, as we'll discuss later in the episode, then he should be dispatched with.
It's so much worse because he's like, I actually really like Rhaenyra and she's doing a pretty good job and she's actually like trying to like manage things well, but we really need a man. Like if he were to come in and be like, she's out of control, she's doing a terrible job, if that were the issue, it makes it so much worse. And Sir Simon Strong, like quiet MVP of the season, like standing in the background in his very magnificent frock coat, watching like as he's drafting letters up to the queen. I loved it. I was kind of shocked because I think that after the Daemon of last week, where he's going to behead Willem Bracken, I expected him to just kill Alfred Broom like right on the spot. Like part of me expected him to just take this guy's head off, and the fact that he didn't like threw me a little bit for a loop. I don't know.
I feel like I'm sorry, what is the name of the character who like goes and tells Rhaenyra what's happening?
Sir Simon Strong.
Sir Simon
He's like
Strong.
Larys's uncle, I think. Simon
so
Strong.
Amazing. Like my MVP character of the season. He's like, oh, we don't have any money. Insert like gold laden coat here.
Yeah. He's great. He's great.
I'm also surprised that Daemon didn't just take this man's head. We see later that he has to essentially like have an outer body experience in order to recognize that Rhaenyra is the queen, which seems like a lot considering that he put the crown on her head in the first place.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey for Daemon Targaryen all season. We could stick with it and just kind of talk it through. So he's going to wake up later with Alice on his bed, like kind of weeping. Everything that Gail Rankin's doing as Alice Rivers is just incredible. These two are such an interesting pairing, Condal like talked a little bit about the notion that Simon Strong has just lived in Harrenhal always. And he's like the guy who lives in the haunted house. He's like, what do you mean? Goes like, I slept fine again. Like, and there's the notion where Alice Rivers sees in Damon almost this kindred spirit, right? Like we've always dealt with like the green seers and the skin changers and like the three-eyed raven and Bran and all the weird old gods magic of the North. And then there's the Targaryen magic and the Targaryen dreamers. And so these two things connecting and meeting between these two disparate characters is so interesting to me. But she's sitting on his bed, like crying, like, okay, I'm going to go to the God's wedding. You're going to come with me. And she gives just this incredible speech that leads to my favorite moment of the episode. But she says, when you came here, you were closed fished. You wish to bend the world to your will, but you've discovered, I think, that this world will not be governed. There are omens here for those who seek them. You do not scoff. And he just says, I'm no longer inclined to. And she goes, I'm pleased to hear it. Do you wish then to learn what is given to you? All your life, you sought to command your own fate. But today you're ready. And he goes and he touches the tree. And here we have this like crazy montage scene. This was electric, LT. This is why I'm showing up for Westeros TV. I love this stuff.
Yes, it was really good. I love all the things that we saw. Like what happened to Brendan Rivers' birthmark in Game of Thrones.
I know. This is where like I agonize about those early seasons of Game of Thrones. I'm like, you could just put a birthmark on him. Oh
yeah.
my God.
But like him eventually seeing Rhaenyra on the throne, like with her crown on, and then seeing Daenerys birth those dragons, like becoming the last dragon rider. Or I guess, yeah, she's the last, along with Jon, technically. And the Night King. But like just absolutely a wild thing to see. And then seeing White Walkers is out of control. Like what I will say is this show calls back to the prophecy of A Song of Ice and Fire so often. We see it throughout episode 2 or season 2 especially. And then we see it here, like writ large for us in terms of these flashbacks. It is so difficult to see that knowing what we got at the end of Game of Thrones.
I feel you. This is where I wanted to go of I think that sometimes, and certainly Game of Thrones at the end of its own proper run, got very self-referential about the kind of importance of the story, and we're telling the story. And you said earlier in this podcast, but the kind of Game of Thrones universe, as we're like getting prepared for a Night of the Seven Kingdoms, we're going to have a new series set in Westeros that's dropping next year. It's going to be on in the off years that probably features Brendan Rivers, Blood Raven, aka the Three-Eyed Crow. I can't help but feel a little bit like, is this like a bridge too far? Like, are you doing the Star Wars thing right now where you're trying to like retcon, repair the damage of the end seasons of Game of Thrones with these other projects and create this kind of greater tapestry of the Westerosi cinematic universe? Like, I don't know that anybody's looking for that. And I'm not sure that that's the right move, you know?
Yeah, because it feels like fan service, but it's in the service of fans who didn't ask for it. And who are incredibly disgruntled based on what happened at the end of Game of Thrones. And as such, we're almost reluctant to tune into House of the Dragon because of how badly they felt treated by the ending of Game of Thrones.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So, yes, I'm sure they're trying to, and somehow Palpatine returns this all, but it doesn't ring, it almost rings hollow in a way, because it's just like all of these people are fighting and dying for this to ultimately happen.
I feel you. So this is where I'm so conflicted, because the scene is awesome, man. We're like at Harrenhal. We got the Weirwood with George Martin's face, Alice Rankin, Matt Smith. These guys are killing it. They come walking up to the tree. Here's this little antlered person in the background, LT. What the hell was that?
What was that?
That's one of the Green Men. The whole story is, if we recall, the Andals came across
like
from the
Always
Marrow
Sunny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just like Always Sunny. That was totally Charlie. Green Man, baby. Wild card. Oh my God. I can't believe we got to It's Always Sunny on this podcast, but
You're
we
gonna
did.
call someone a green man.
Yes.
In my presence, that's what you're gonna get.
It's fair. I can't believe I didn't think of it sooner. The whole story of like the Andals came over from the Narrow Sea. They started cutting down all the trees. They're cutting down the weirwoods. The children of the forest go to war with them, right? And there's this pact that's made between the children of the forest and the Andals, the first men, and it's made at the God's Eye. This is like this island that's right here next to Harrenhal. It's a very important place in the Westerosi iconography. And so the Green Men, old Nan talks about them a lot with Bran early on in A Game of Thrones, but they're like this hybrid almost between the children of the forest and the first men, who are tasked with primarily protecting the Isle of Faces in the God's Eye, which is the place where this pact between the children of the forest and the first men was made. It's very cool. It's very nerdy. It's very like deep cut fantasy shit for me. And I love this kind of stuff. But then Helena shows up out of the Upside Down from Stranger Things and is like, "You're just in a story, zany Uncle Damon. Don't worry about it." And so much of it is so cool, LT. The transition from Harrenhal to King's Landing to Helena, like talking to herself. But I'm with you where there's the part of me that's like, do I need the Westerosi cinematic universe? Do I want to think about season 7 Game of Thrones? Not really. I don't want to think about that.
Yeah. And you'll be like recasting Kit Harington because he's like the evil version of
the
character
Man.
Jon Snow. Sorry, I still haven't gotten over them bringing Robert Downey Jr. back to play Doom. That is wild and a discussion for another podcast.
It really is insane. That's so insane.
I thought it was a joke, Philly. Like I saw the tweets before I like read anything about it, and I was like, "Oh, that's funny." They joked at Comic-Con.
Me too. I very much was like, "Wait, is it April? Like, what month is it? What's going on here? Is this serious?" Oh my God.
Yeah, but like, do Helena and Alex Rivers know each other? Like, do they talk somehow? Communicate? This leaves so many questions. Like, are we going to see Alice in the wars to come? Because we need her. We desperately need her. Like, we need her to like grab Aegon and Aemon and be like, "Come stay at Harrenhal for a little bit. I'll show you the way."
That would be very interesting, wouldn't it? There's a lot of speculation around Alice Rivers. I know Gail Rankin has like gone on record in some interviews saying like, "I'm hundreds of years old. Alice is hundreds of years old." There's a lot of speculation about whether or not Alice Rivers lives beyond her time and is present in any of the later Westeros Game of Thrones stories that we get. So again, like in this world where A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is going to come out, this is about like 4 generations later down the line, and it features characters like Brynden Rivers, Bloodraven, that we saw in that vision, that I have to wonder how much they're going to try to connect these things. Is Thea Saban going to become like the Kate Blanchett Galadriel of like the Rings of Power, showing up in everything to narrate? Like, I don't know. And there is a bridge too far, because some of this I felt like is just so conceptually cool, and it leans into the fantasy of this story in a way that Game of Thrones was afraid to sometimes.
Right.
And I love that. But they're getting very like self-referential about like, it's all part of a story, Uncle Damon. And that being the kind of linchpin to kind of get him over the edge. I don't know if that's satisfying to me. I feel like it almost undercuts everything that happened with Viserys over the last couple of episodes. Does that make sense?
It does. I think that's why I was just like, this scene is really cool, but I don't know how I feel about it within the larger context that they're trying to spin it in. Like, I think it's important that they recognize that a large part of the fandom fell in love with Daenerys over like the first 7 seasons of the show, and cared about that character, still care about that character so much. Like the amount of babies who have been named Daenerys, it's absolutely wild. And then for them to just be like, and I guess the gods flipped a coin and she went mad. in such a short amount of time was wild. And now, like, I think watching House of the Dragon, I partially want to forget
Yep.
about everything that happened in the end of Game of Thrones.
Yep.
So for them to be repeatedly tying it back to that like proper series, I get is part of the DNA of it overall, but that hurts. And then for them to be like, you're just part of a story. And for Tyrion in that last season to be like, the power of stories. And for us to get the king that we inevitably got, just out of control. It doesn't sit right with me.
I totally relate. I think that it's a bad look for a couple of reasons, because I think there's the book fans who are agonizingly waiting 12 years for the next book. So like it feels bad to reference the end of the story that has not ended yet for those people. That it feels bad for most of the audience that came away very dissatisfied. Daenerys, not the least of the characters, that because of like this frantic dash to the end was not given the appropriate time to play that arc out. Like part of the frustration with the end of Game of Thrones is that once these guys got away from Martin's writing, they seem to have completely lost the thread on the trajectory of character arcs for almost everybody in the show, from Tyrion to Jon to Dany to Bran to all of them. And they just felt like they were in a rush to get it done. Right. So I'm with you. I think that I think that the more House of the Dragon can stand on its own in a time period hundreds of years before Game of Thrones, the better off it is. It should not be doing the whole like self-referential thing to the greater story. I appreciate like even the whole thing with like, we need a Targaryen to have power, Azor Ahai, all the prophecy stuff. Like, I don't know. It's really hard because that stuff hasn't come to fruition in the books. So I think book readers get like extra frustrated along with the show watchers. I'm with you. It's a little bit crazy.
And then for Ryan Condal to be like, just because we showed this doesn't mean that we're saying Daenerys was the prince that was promised.
Yes.
It's just like, then who else is then? You can't say that it's Jon, because Jon ended it with nothing. So what's happening?
It was Arya, right? I mean, it had to have been Arya. That's what's going on there. Nonetheless, the Daemon stuff, I think mileage varies, right? But it's really all driving us back towards this reunion, ultimately, that like once he understands his place in it, Thea Saban appears out of the Upside Down. This is all just a story. Now you understand your part in it. Here comes Rhaenyra showing up. I do have to say, Rhaenyra coming to Harrenhal, this was absolutely incredible. Like everything from the dragon landing out on the front, it's evoking when she shows up at Dragonstone in season 1 to get the egg back from zany Uncle Daemon, and Sir Simon Strong meeting with her. Then she comes in, none of these men kneel, and the whole interaction that they have as he comes walking up to her, all of these men are sworn to me, and she takes the step back and kind of like gives the loud public room voice, and who are you sworn to? And this whole exchange between them is electric and incredible. And Simon Strong, LT, in the background, I don't know if you caught this, he's giving the little golf clap in the back. This is like the MVP moment of the whole episode for me. It's just next level as Daemon does like the let's get fired up bros at the end.
Yeah. So good. Like the fact that they go back to High Valyrian, which is how they used to communicate with each other starting when she was very young. And the fact that they literally almost kiss before they realize that they're in front of a room full of people watching them. So good. And then for Simon to clap and like do a little, it's just, it's so cute. Like I also love how Caraxes sees the other dragons and is like, thank God.
Oh yeah.
I've been here, pigs or no, for so long, just going through the stupid dreams that Daemon has been going through. Thank God you're here.
Yeah, I saw a couple of people saying that today. Like the only winner of episode 8 was Caraxes because his crush Cyrax came back and his bro Seasmoke, and he's like, "Oh my God, where have you guys been? I've been here having nightmares for the last 2 months. This place is horrible."
And how could you not have a crush on Cyrax? She's got that necklace just like her mom.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
so good.
She's a queen, you know. I don't blame him. I don't blame the long neck red devil of Caraxes. The whole interaction between them I thought is great. And, you know, I saw a couple of folks positing and talking about like this is the emotional payoff of the whole season, right? I mean,
Yeah.
fundamentally, without like a conflict that we're driving to of resolution, this has been the conflict. This has been the linchpin, is this question of whether or not she's going to show up here and realize that there is now another faction at play and she can't count on Damon. And it's tough because I think that a lot of people came away from the end of season one where we literally have the exact same scene of this guy kneeling before his queen. And you have to really be on board with Damon's emotional journey this season to be satisfied by this. And with the fact that he had to come to his own kind of terms about, I don't want to rule. I just wanted my brother to love me enough to tell me that he would trust me to do it. And I think that that's like insightful and interesting, but also kind of tough when you only have 8 episodes, you know? Like I'm
Yeah.
very mixed opinions here, also because it's a bit of a deviation from Damon in the text, who
Mhm.
like once he's on Team Rhaenyra, he's just on Team Rhaenyra. There's not like a whole lot of questioning after the fact, you know?
Yeah, and also the fact that it took us so many episodes of him just hallucinating to get here. Uh, like I was hoping that his that this whole arc would have been resolved by episode 7,
Hmm.
but it's so drawn out. I mean, obviously what we eventually get is wonderful in him, you know, having that meeting with his brother and figuring out exactly what it is that he wanted to do, but then also getting those that like download from the tree to understand his place in the larger story. But I don't know why that couldn't have happened earlier.
I'm with you there. You know, as much as I love to see a green man and weirwood trees and strange magic and Targaryen shit, you know. I love the buildup of Helena. Like, I'm with you. The pacing has been frustrating. I think that the creatives have their hands tied to a degree coming
Yeah.
into the whole like 10 episode 8 rug pull. That feels frustrating. Uh, let's talk about him a little bit. Sir Kristen Cole, LT. He's out there, he's smelling his handkerchief, the scent of a woman, hoo-ah, and Sir Gawain not having it. I couldn't get over this scene. This felt like, holy shit, what is even happening? As Gawain's got his sword to the Lord Commander's throat. And Kristen Cole's speech right here, it's like Shakespeare, man. Like, do you have no honor? I think of nothing else. She saved my life twice, once from the headman's axe, once for myself. She has been the beacon I follow. That high tower, of course, like the beacon
Right.
is literally their symbol in Old Town. It's so powerful. Do not think I have no shame in me, sir. Desire for women has brought me grief after grief. I hate Kristen Cole, but I have never related to this guy more. Like, oh my God, I feel your pain. I feel your pain. But he gets into this whole thing that I think is a little bit of bullshit. Perhaps all men are corrupt and true honor is a mist that melts in the morning. This is exactly what Allison said to him about his own chivalry when he's trying to like slip out the bedroom a couple episodes ago. So the way that he's like repurposed her language and it is even governing him. And then he gets here at the end. I have no philosophy, or rather, my philosophy was this, to protect the righteous and dispense justice on the rest. But now you saw what I saw. The dragons dance, and men are like dust under their feet. All our fine thoughts and our endeavors are as nothing. We march now towards our annihilation. To die will be a bit of a relief, I think. Don't you think? It's just incredible. This is the best Kristen Cole has ever been on the screen.
It is because he's gonna die soon.
Yes.
Um, but
No
I mean,
spoilers, but just vibes.
yeah, just I mean, vibes of death. Soon. Uh, yes, it is because I believe that he has come to grips with his own mortality, and he knows that he's marching to death. So it's all just kind of the reflections of someone on death row, essentially, who is just like, I had my time in this life where I there were things that I enjoyed that maybe I shouldn't have.
Mhm.
And now all I can do is hope that whatever comes after death is kinder than what I had to live through. And it's just the idea that someone has put a sword to the great Kristen Cole's neck and he just sits there, um, and only picks his knife up to clean it, or his sword up to clean it, is a humbling of the character in a big way. And I think that's kind of what audiences have always wanted for Kristen Cole, for him to be humbled.
Oh, too true. The great and wise Joanna Robinson was talking this week about how she hates Christian Cole, but this is the best Christian Cole because he's showing some self-awareness. He's
Yeah.
acknowledging his own failings, his shortcomings, you know? And I think this is a really, it's PTSD that we're interacting with in an interesting way. And I think that this is it's a trope in a lot of movies of like that soldier walking towards annihilation, towards certain doom. I think it can be a really powerful idea in drama because it's so real and tangible, and we can connect it to so many real historical moments and the countless lives lost to like the injustice of war and violence and all of it. And it really speaks to me about this kind of reflection, not just on his own mortality, but on his own shortcomings, on his hypocrisy. For the first time ever, he's acknowledging it. And he's saying, like, you could kill me and you would be right, but just know that she broke no vows. I broke
Mhm.
my vows. And if you do kill me for this, you're just going to dishonor your sister in the history books, and she will forever be looked at. The stain will fall not upon some nameless guy from Dorne in the King's Guard, but on your noble family, and
Right.
she will have to carry that burden. And it's a little bit of like, white knighting in a very literal way. But I think there's something that I love about this so much because Kristen Cole is like a product of this world in the same way that this world like refutes and rejects Rhaenyra's right to rule or Rhaenys's claim to the throne at one time. Like it impresses upon men again and again and again. It's the Jamie Lannister thing of one of the
Mhm.
best characters in Game of Thrones, whose arc was killed in the end. But that notion of like so many vows, protect your king, protect your father, protect
Yeah.
the innocent, protect your family, like which is right, which takes priority, the hypocrisy that kind of growing up crashes you into. This guy grew up with this very simple, narrow idea of what it is to be a man, quote unquote, to have honor and integrity. And then to come into this world where you realize, like, oh no, like I will have to sacrifice something. And where does it go? And when you don't sacrifice, then you're Ned Stark and and other people pay the cost for you. You lose your life and your daughter's freedom and all of it. Like to be unyielding in this world is to suffer. And there's this impossibility for his position that I just think really speaks to like the way the patriarchy poisons men. That
Yeah.
doesn't get talked about a lot when we talk about
No.
the patriarchy because dudes get so defensive about like, "Ooh," and like, but like, dude, that's what you're not getting is like part of it is the way that it breaks us and it raises us with like these completely impossible expectations that shatter on first contact with reality, I guess.
Yeah, that's all true. And I do think that this is probably my favorite scene in either season 1 or 2 with Kristen Cole. But also he called Rhaenyra the whore of Dragonstone.
Yeah, let's
So
watch him die, burn.
yeah.
I feel
I
you.
mean, Bayla should have killed him when she had the chance.
I feel you. No love lost for Kristen Cole from me. I just love him in this part. Hearing him
Yeah.
articulate this is like this is great.
It is just like just hard to watch as well because you see like all the swagger and bravado gone from him ever since he saw that first dragon battle. He's just been a changed man
Yep.
in a lot of ways, and this little aside just kind of reflects all that.
I talked about it a little earlier, but Masters of the Air earlier this season, I can't help but really relate back to that. I know a lot of times when we talk about thrones and Westeros, we relate the dragons to weapons of mass destruction and
Yeah.
nukes. But I do think it's very similar to me as to a lot of these folks in World War II that were dealing with bombing campaign and the first
Yeah.
kind of major warfare. I mean, it's literally like fire raining from the sky. And so many of these soldiers talked about the experience of like watching those planes battle soul, and it broke them. It shattered them in the same way that we see with Cole. So it's a really tremendous performance from Fabian Fagel. That much, at least, we can agree on. So Helena, this is a really interesting note. Sweet, dear, innocent Helena, who's talking about, I was happier before I was queen. This scene with her and Alicent, oh my God, because Alicent's like, yeah, I know. Me too. You know? It's just so sad as Aemond arrives, like, the crown has need of your service. You must fly to war. This whole interaction, finally, we see Alicent, the mother, defending her child from like the predations of this world, you know?
And it's gotten to the point where Alicent will only defend Helena now because she's seen, what's become of her boys. And for her to stand up to Aemon the way that she does, I will give her that. Like, no matter how much power her sons get, she's not afraid to stand up to them because she did it first, honestly. Like, she ruled while Viserys was ill. And they, I know her father propped her up to do that in the same way that they tried to make way for her sons. But now that she's seen what her sons are capable of, she's just like, okay, like, this has to stop. And Helena, responding to Aemond in just the way that she stands up and says, I won't burn people, is it got to my heartstrings. Like, I love Helena so much that I just want to protect her. And so it's really good to see Alicent being her protector in this instance, because it's the gut reaction, I think, of the audience.
Oh, for real. Just to talk about the book a little bit, Helena, a lot of the characters in the book, especially the women characters, Rhaenyra, Helena, Alicent, they get short shrift. And I think that the charitable way to talk about Martin's narrative in the book is that it's intentional and that it is the patriarchy erasing the role of these very powerful women during this very important period of time and trivializing it again and again and again. We hear about how Rhaenyra is off the grid because she had this miscarriage and she lost her son and she's in a mother's kind of mourning. Helena, after Blood and Cheese, in the books, again, she has these two sons, and Blood and Cheese are like, all right, which one? And she says, all right, kill the younger one. And then they say, your mommy wants you dead, and they kill the older one. So Helena's left with this son that she picked for death. And in the narrative of the text, they describe her basically as like a broken person, right? As like she's just kind of locked herself in her room. She's just shattered by this experience that she won't deal. And it's very trivializing, it really, it like subdues her. It makes her very small. So I love this interpretation that it's not that she's some broken histrionic woman who's too busy crying to get involved. She has her own ethics and her own morality, and she will take his stand to her brother. And what is so tremendous, Aemond is not wrong in what he's saying to Alicent here. He's like, this is not about the right to rule anymore. Our very lives are at stake. If we lose this fight, we will die. And Alicent, having created this situation, the self-fulfilling prophecy of someday Rhaenyra is going to come to kill you so she can legitimize her own claim to the throne. And the fact that that's where we end up. And Helena, taking this stand here and the whole interaction that she's having with Aemond. Aemond is just, for his part, trying to protect his family, and he's dysfunctional and broken and tried to kill his brother. And like, that's why I think it's important that we got rid of the second kid in Blood and Cheese, because Aemon stands to inherit the throne. And like, that's not the case in the book, which changes this whole dynamic. But I think that they're all like so sad and tragic. And the strongest person in this room, to me, feels like Helena, knowing who she is and who she's going to be. In that sense of like, this is a story. She's like, no, I will not be that character in this story, and I love it.
Yeah, me too.
the setup to the other half of it, just to like talk about the Ewan Mitchell and the acting. The other half is like her coming out of the dream with Damon while they're talking out on the parapet. And now he's having this 1-to-1. And he's like, look, our mother's not a dragon rider, but like you and I understand. And he does this thing, LT, where he reaches for her to touch her. She's like standing just kind of in front of him, not looking. And he's saying, like, please come with me to Harrenhal. And he's asking, like, please help me. I need help. And reaching for her, but he stops. He can't actually make contact. He can't do the thing. And it's more of like what I'm talking about. I don't mean to be too charitable in the interpretation, but the way that like this kid is poisoned by the patriarchy, right? He's trying to
Yeah.
be the guy he thinks he needs to be to impress everybody. There was a point like at the wedding before he claims Vagar where his father jokes with them about like, well, if he's confident enough to claim a dragon, he can have one, you know? And that wounds him. These wounds of his childhood really never did heal. Allison just right. This kid is damaged and just feels so alone. And he is asking her for help, but he's also asking her to like go burn the innocents. And they can't find a place. And like it's electric between the two of them out on that balcony.
It's such a good scene. And I think that part of the kind of what Helena has to keep to like, you know, steel herself with all of what's going on is that she is a dreamer.
Mhm.
So, which I don't think is true in the book, right?
It's not something that's ever addressed in the books. No,
Yeah.
they just write her off again as like she's off the board. But I love the notion that her dragon is literally Dreamfire. Like it
Right.
tracks, you know?
I just feel like she knows what's coming. And with the murder of her son, it's confirmed that she's not just making things up. Like these are actually things that are going to occur.
Mhm.
So she can fire back with the certain knowledge of Aegon will be king again. You, however, are going to die. And there's whether and he threatens her life twice during this point.
Mhm.
But she goes, whether or not I'm alive, it will not change what's going to happen. And he kind of backs off. I just think that it's such a great performance by Thea Saban, but also of Ewan Mitchell just kind of having to come to terms with the fact that it doesn't matter how macho he is. It doesn't matter if
Mhm.
he has the biggest weapon of mass destruction. He is going to come to his end, and there's nothing can be done to change that. And I think that he trusts, as much as he doesn't want to, his sister's visions.
Mhm.
So it's a harrowing scene between the two of them that is framed in a very like light, like gentle light, like the most gentle conversation that these two could possibly have.
Mhm. It's tender, the like
Yeah.
tonality. Yeah. Yep.
And I think framing it that way, where they're not in an argument, this is just a brother and sister talking to each other about the state of things. And she fully knows that he tried to kill Aegon.
So that's a really important note, I think, because there's this element where, you know, by removing the second kid and making him the heir, he stands to inherit the throne, but he also theoretically like stands to inherit his sister. And I don't mean to like say it so
Yeah.
overtly, but there is that. I know there's a lot of like Aemon Helena shippers out there on the internet. God bless you.
Yeah.
More power
I've
to
seen
you.
that.
He had this really like kind interpretation when Aegon's being a dick in season 1 of like, she is so weird. Like, and it's
Yeah.
like, she's your queen, man. And I think you can read this way as distorted as all the incest is, that he loves her. And
Right.
that he would honor her. He would
Yeah.
treat her so much better than Aegon ever did. He would be stepping out with Miss Sylvie down in the brothel if he were the king, right? And there's that notion that he has done the worst possible thing when nobody is looking and nobody should know. And the fact that she, of all people, the one person that he most, I think, desperately wants love and approval and help from and solidarity with, knows the truth unambiguously of what happened there and asserts it to him, not questioningly, but is like,
Mhm.
no, I saw it. And that stops him in his tracks of like, oh, you know me for the worst part of myself.
Right.
Like, no matter if I could get you to convince you to fly for this war, you will never love me the way that I want you to. This never ends clean. It was just really good. These two are very good actors for such young
Yeah.
folks, you know?
They're so good.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see what they get into after this show is done.
Oh, yeah, no joke. I will follow them both. Yeah, they're very interesting performers. So we're jumping around all over the place, but a couple of things left, saved the best for last. I want to talk about Corliss and Alan down by the docks. This whole conversation that they had was so powerful. Abubakar Salim, I've really enjoyed him in the role, but it's been a pretty small part. He hasn't had a ton to do, but man, dude showed up this week. What a tremendous moment. How did this work for you?
This landed for me probably as well as anything in this episode. Um, Partially because I've been there. Um, I grew up in a family pretty much of all women, and there just weren't any guys around. My uncle was around sometime, but he was constantly being deployed because he was a Marine.
Sure.
So we really just grew up with my mom, my grandmother, my aunt, like raising us. So the idea of struggling and not having a father figure or your father there is very familiar territory to me. I mean, like my own father didn't even start really showing up for me until I was like halfway through college when he realized that I had like gotten into Northwestern, and then he randomly showed up from my graduation with like his new wife and kids. So I completely understand what Alan is talking about here. Like, imagine a child who has to go without and who is poor and who is feeling shame just for like being in the world. And you're trying to couch this, Corliss, as I'm trying to help you. Like now you want to help me after I've made a name for myself and people are starting to figure out that I'm your bastard son and your war might be able to use me. I will continue to serve under you because that is what I have committed to do. But you do not get to try to make believe that this is some type of like altruism coming from you to help me.
Yeah, it's really well said. I talked to you a little bit about this before we started recording today because it's a big pivot from the books, and I think that most of the changes from the books have been really strong and made for better characters, like we're talking about with Helena. So in the text, Adam and Alan's mother is this woman named Mouse, and Mouse owns a very successful shipyard. So while they are not nobles, they do not want in the way that Alan is articulating here. They don't grow up impoverished and kind of struggling in that way. They're at least part of like the upper middle class. So this pivot to take, and Mouse is like a relevant character in the books. Like their mom is still alive when all of this stuff starts going on. Like the whole dragon seeds, their mom is kind of the one of like, you guys go claim dragons. She's a very fun little side character in the books. But so to take her out and reshift it here, it just felt so poignant and so intentional in the way that we're talking about modern families and then the broken modern family, right? What he's saying here, do you know what hunger does to a boy, what grief does, or shame? I would fish, hoarding my coppers to starve off the winter, and watch as the man who sired me walked past with his own son and heir wrapped in furs, choosing which sweetmeats to eat after supper. It's such a powerful sentiment. I grew up in like a divorced family. My dad remarried, new kids, new family, new parents, nice neighborhood, all of that stuff. So I kind of relate to some of that in that way. I get that feeling, though I wasn't abandoned or put off in that way. But it feels like such an intentional change that just resonated so powerfully. This is an awesome scene between these two guys to really put Corliss in his place. Now the boy is dead and the sister before him and the heir that took their place. And now you remember I live. Now you wish to scatter the crumbs of your favor. Like again, with this too little too late, it really is powerful. I'm an honorable man and I'll serve you if I must. But if it's all the same, I'll decline any offers of help. If I survive this war, I wish to continue as I began, alone. It just was an incredible scene, a powerhouse moment from this guy.
So good. And the fact that he hasn't said much in all of the other episodes makes this even more powerful. It's one of those like still waters run deep kind of situations where he has essentially been silent, other than that scene that he had with his brother where he was like cutting off all of the hair that might make him resemble a Valerian. And here he just completely like eviscerates this man. And they said it in the like the little vignette like after the show.
Mhm.
No one ever talks to Corlys like this.
No, this is
Maybe
a
other than
very
Rhaenys.
respected, powerful man. Yes.
And sometimes, you have to speak truth to power in order for them to understand what you've been through and where you're coming from. Because I really do think that Corlys was like, okay, well, my wife and my kids are gone now.
Mhm.
So, but I happen to have these other kids. They'll prove worthy if I just give them a little bit of attention now. But they're grown men.
Mhm.
So, and they've already figured out a way to make their way in the world. As children growing up, they had to work, or else no one ate. I'm sure there like weren't fires. So they definitely know what to do now that they're men. Just telling Corlys that he doesn't get to have his way is such a powerful statement, and one that's delivered so well. And I feel like this is a conversation that every child who has grown up without a parent wants to have with that parent that has left them.
For sure. You feel the way it's like, oh, he's been thinking about this. Like that was not off the cuff. This has weighed on this man for a long time. Part of what I really love about it is I imagine a good portion of the audience could watch this guy like, what's your problem, man? You know what I mean? And like and project that frustration onto Alan of like, come on, this is your moment. Like pick yourself up by your bootstraps type of bullshit. And it's like, yeah, but like let's take it in context, a little bit of him reaffirming why, oh, this isn't the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, that my dad has showed up in the 11th hour of my life, now that everybody else that he cares about is dead and he's wandering through his big empty palace alone, surrounded by ghosts. Now we matter. It's really, really powerful. And part of what I think is really distinct about this presentation is Rhaenys like gives him that permission in those closing scenes that they get of like, this man should not suffer in the shadows because of who he is. It's not his fault that he's your bastard son. Whereas in the book, Rhaenys never addresses any of them. She dies, and it's like Corlys was too scared of her to ever address these bastard sons, right? Like it's a very different interpretation, So I just love it. And I think it sets up a very interesting distinction between the brothers of Alan and Adam.
Right.
I really wish we got more of these guys and we were going to get to talk about them more, but in a couple of years we will.
Do you know which one of them is older?
Yes. Alan is supposed to be the younger of the two in the book, which is interesting, I think. Because he clearly seems like the older one of the two in the roles.
He's giving older brother energy for sure.
In the text LT, they're like 16 years old. They're little kids. They're not like these grown badass men. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One's like 16 and one's like 14, I think. Something like that.
Oh, yikes.
All these kids are way younger in the books. It's troubling how young they are.
It is really terrifying how young. Wow. But he's giving older brother energy because for Adam, he almost seemed to welcome the attaboy that he got, which I could see happening with a younger sibling. An older sibling has to be the one, it like becomes the second parent essentially.
Yes. Yeah.
And would be far less likely to glom on to like whatever praise they were given.
Yeah, no, I think that's really insightful, that notion that like he had to carry the weight for the little brother that easily could not see so much of the kind of daily struggle that kept them alive through those years. Just a great scene. It's really setting up some great stuff. I think this ensemble is just so good, really like incredible acting throughout, and the writing for so many of these pairings is tremendous. So that sets up the whole final kind of encounter that we get. yet. First, Mysaria is with Rhaenyra as they're out on their balcony where they go. You've done what no one else would dream of, and you have been rewarded. The gods favor you. Victory is in your grasp. Rhaenyra then retorting with the same, and yet to claim it, I am striking, and striking doom thousands to their deaths. I don't think that's what my father would have wanted. And Mysaria just like pumping her up, drink the Kool-Aid, my queen. Be strong. You know you are just. You must not let the realm fall to those who care for power over peace. And Rainier able to acknowledge, but who pays the price in the end? That takes us to this, like her waking up in the middle of the night by the Kingsguard as she comes down to the library and it's Sister Alicent hanging out. I love the like reaction. Emma Darcy coming down the stairs, that like moment of like, what the F are you doing in my castle,
The
bitch?
same reaction I
had. Unreal, LT. How did Master Orwell become the Master of Whispers to like Davos Seaworth smuggle the queen out of the city with the new naval blockade put in place too?
They were supposed to be checking all the ships, I thought.
We're yada-yadaing a lot of the good stuff, as Elaine might say.
They're doing such a great job of checking the ships and not letting your mother through to Dragonstone, Aemond. Yeah, when I saw that it was Alicent, I was like, okay. What could you possibly have to say?
It reminded me a little bit of Obi-Wan with Leia in the trench coat, like skirting his way through.
And you notice that Alicent is wearing blue again.
Yes, the color stuff is fantastic. The kind of shifting out of the green into the darker blues. And she's even wearing a very light blue that's similar to the dresses they had in the beginning. And even Rhaenyra in her like bedgown, in her nightgown, that is not red and black for once. It's kind of this muted. Really is a great touch.
Yeah. This conversation that they have, it's just, I love any moment when these two are on screen together.
They're
honestly
incredible. And I mean, it's clear that the showrunners are gonna reach for every like slip Alice in a trench coat so that we could do this scene every season moment. Like, I don't really blame them because it is pretty goddamn good, you know.
It's really good. And the way that they almost instantly revert back to their childhood selves when they have the conversation with each other. Alicent starting off by saying, "I've been mistaken," I think, is probably the biggest understatement that has happened.
Yeah.
in this show. You think? Lady, you caused all of this to happen. You set it in motion yourself.
Her hand ushered it in like a midwife.
That was a good line. I enjoyed that one. I also love the fact that Rhaenyra wasn't like bowled over just by her mere appearance here. I feel like Rhaenyra kind of put whatever relationship the two of them had to the back burner when she showed up in King's Landing in her sister act, and Alicent was like, "It's too late. There's nothing I can do. It's too late." So Rhaenyra was like, "Bet, I'll just never think of you again." And for her to show up to try to beg Rhaenyra to put an end to what she started, that's some audacity.
It's really out of control, the whole thing. I've been mistaken. I think you like noted it really is an incredible way. And Rhaenyra's like frustration and indignation of this, like, it is too late, Alicent. I love what you're talking about, the kind of intimacy, the familiarity with which they talk to each other. There's a comfortableness there that is not there with so many of the other people in their lives. And, you know, we talked about the mirroring of the knife cuts and Alicent coming to this, like, what is this vicious cycle? It all just feeds into itself. I haven't actually gotten anywhere. And the inversion of duty and responsibility, right? Like Maester Aemon says it to Jon Snow back in early Game of Thrones, but like love is the death of duty. And that's this really powerful theme that we've explored this season. And like Alicent's duty and her obligation. And now she's finally going to put it down. She's going to like break that tie of fealty to her house. She has so many kind of great lines along the way, and Rhaenyra challenging her about how you made virtue your banner, and she's like, yeah, because you didn't care. Like, I think I did it in response to you and the way that like these two fed into the whole relationship. But to bring us to the end of Alicent ultimately like, Yeah, so I could totally get Aegon to surrender though.
Mhm.
The Rhaenyra, like, no, you don't get it. Like, I can't, that cannot work. I have to have his head, and you know that I have to have it in a public, very big display. Like, how is this going to work? It's just electric. These two really are like incredible together. It's too late, Allison. You said it all yourself. Blood has been shed, cities burned, armies march, and you wish to wash your hands of what you set into motion. And Allison's got like a real parent. She's like, oh, the arrogance of blaming me. Like, if it weren't me, somebody else just would have done it anyway, Rhaenyra.
But they
And she's like,
didn't.
yeah, but you did it. You. Oh my God. It's great.
It's just it's Alicent's refusal to just apologize for me, you know?
Oh, for
I
sure.
feel
Yeah.
like that could go such a long way. This, I think, is runs very parallel to a situation that's been unfolding in gymnastics recently, where this former U.S. gymnast, Michaela Skinner, came out right after the Olympic trials to say, this team like that's been chosen, they're lazy and their coaches have to be so easy on them because of safe sport, and back when Marta Caroli was in charge they would have been a better team. And so Simone Biles did nothing except post lazy, lack of talent Olympic champions on her Instagram, and apparently Michaela has been getting a lot of hate since that has happened. So today she posted a video, as opposed to just shutting up and saying nothing, that was like, I call on you, Simone, to use your power to get your fans to stop harassing me. When at no point has she said she's sorry for what
Mhm.
happened, or taken accountability, or acknowledged that she's brought this upon herself. And Alicent is Michaela Skinner. Like, Alicent is this woman who wants to, like, who wanted to cling to piety. And the idea that her once best friend would come into power and kill all of her children for some reason, so she rose up against her. Yet she has never apologized for the mistake that she made in setting all of this in motion. And she has never taken accountability for her role in all of these people who have been killed.
Mhm.
So, of course, Rhaenyra is not going to just like be like, okay, and I'll run away with you. You're right. What dream world are you living in? Is your daughter the dreamer, or are you?
It's really next level, you know, the amount of, it feels like she's high on Harrenhal without even having to step foot in the castle, LT,
High on
because
Harrenhal.
there is this notion that, like, forget saying I'm sorry for, starting a civil war and convincing your brother to seize the throne from you. But how about the like decades of cruelty while we lived together in the same house? Like, do we remember I just gave birth to this infant child,
Yeah.
Rhaenyra, dragging herself through the halls of the keep only so that Allison can be like, oh yeah, let me talk shit to your husband who is definitely not the father, and then like wheel around on your dad? Like, again, we can go back to Otto and like hurt people, but Allison's privilege here is so contemptible. Like, if this was at all supposed to be redemptive for her as a character, I don't know. It made me look at her worse in the end, not because she sells Aegon's head to her, because
Right.
I think that there's like a pretty broken, dysfunctional, I read too much George Martin perspective that I will present, that like her son is this tortured kid whose cock exploded like a sausage. Maybe death, it will be a sweet release, like Kristen Cole said. Like, I could imagine the mother coming up with a dysfunctional, well, death at least will take him away from like grieving in pain in this room alone.
Mhm.
I don't want him to die, but he's pretty screwed already. So I guess it just Alicent is so broken and incapable of acknowledging what a horrible woman she was for
Right.
years, and how she like completely fed this machine. And now the inevitable conclusion of Aegon needs to lose his head. We're here, and it's only because you created the self-fulfilling prophecy to get us here. It's just next level. And Rhaenyra literally like with the tears in her eyes as Alicent slowly looks at her and nods, that notion of like Rhaenyra, like in her own right, becoming more ruthless and realizing like, I don't want to do this, but I have to do this. And like, man, this is brutal. It felt to me like very clear win for Team Black, emotionally, at least morally.
Very much so, to the point where Alicent is basically Team Black now.
Pretty much.
She's just like, yeah, okay, you can kill him. Like, I did this to protect him, air quotes, but you can kill him. It's fine.
It's next level. I mean, how does it land for you, this notion where she's like, okay, I'm going to open the door. I just want it all to end. All I want is my freedom. Let me take Helena and my grandson and like get out of here. Like, should she be allowed to have that? And like, do you think that it will play out like this? I guess is my question for you.
Oh, there's no way it plays out. It's simply is that, for the first reason being, no one knows where Aegon is going except Larys.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not even going to be there to potentially surrender.
He's got him in the back of the Los Pollos Hermanos cart,
And like, what is Alicent going to do? Physically restrain Aemon and keep him from hurting Rhaenyra when she comes through the gates that will be open, I guess? It is just a dream. It is just a nice dream that Alicent has. She's trying to free herself from the cage that she's been in for her entire life, and being like, I know I started this war, but don't you think things can be different? And relying on, I don't even know what she's relying on, but like relying on Rhaenyra to be the bigger person and make all of this right after everything that Rhaenyra has lost.
She's casting herself at the mercy of a friend who once loved her. I think that she's relying on the fact that like Rhaenyra always has been pretty reasonable about all of this, and like that her side has escalated it here. And she's, I think, counting on the fact that the woman wants the throne and to rule and will look for the best avenue to get there. So we'll see kind of how it all goes. It really just, it struck me at the end, this beat of her leaving. Rhaenyra is saying to her, like, history is going to paint you a villain. They're going to call you a cold queen who was defeated, who grasped her power and was defeated and then kind of shoved off for her bitterness. And she's like, so what? I don't care. I just want to live. And this is a little bit, again, of like the Leo pointing at the book of like, oh, yes, that's what happened in the book that I just read, where Alicent is portrayed as a one-note, like villainous, vindictive ice queen, So there's a little bit of that like doesn't work for me as well. But this final closing, the Ramin Djawadi score starts kicking in, and it's like, holy shit, this guy really like doesn't miss anymore. It's so incredibly good. She says, come with me. My part is here, whether I will it or no. It was decided for me a long time ago. And this inversion of the two of them, of the love and the duty, of Alicent like stepping out onto the open balcony of Dragonstone, the sky open in front of her as the sun is kind of like setting on the horizon, and then, or rising rather on the horizon. And then Rhaenyra framed with the library and the little cubicle with all of the scrolls above her, the kind of weight of history, the imposition, her little like tiny box in the story that she's going to fill out. The cinematography of like this final montage is like just staggering, along with the music, which just makes it that much more frustrating that I'm like, oh my God, how is this the end? Because it's actually a really great just piece of filmmaking that is so frustrating, knowing that we're going to have to wait for 2 years,
Yeah, because then we like get an actual montage
of so much stuff. It's Hugh and Ulf and Adam getting armored up. We got Rhaenyra hunting down Sheep Stealer. Here's the Hightower army with the young brother Daeron and Tessarion, the Blue Queen. This is my favorite sexy dragon. Very blue. Cobalt wings. I saw that. Thank you guys. We get the Greybeards from Winterfell coming down over the twins, and Jason Lannister. We hate that guy marching on Harrenhal. Daemon is getting ready to march out of Harrenhal. Tywin and his new lady love, Captain Lohar, on the gullet. Corlys and Alan are boarding the Queen. Otto? Where's Otto?
It's a great question that we've been asking for most of the season, and now I guess we got the answer.
Honestly, like, I'm trying not to lay too much blame at Ryan Condal's feet, but this one's a little bit like, "What the fuck, Ryan Condal? Where's
Yeah.
Otto? What are you doing with Otto here?" And then these 2 final closing shots of Alicent outside Dragonstone and Rhaenyra in the library. I just was so struck by, like, all the camera work here, so much of the stuff that they're doing in these paired scenes with Aemond and Helena, but the Rhaenyra and Alicent scene, it was gorgeous.
It was beautiful. It was beautifully shot. It was a beautifully shot episode 7 of what should have been not the season finale.
Can we talk about the title too? The Queen Who Ever Was? Like,
What the
that's a
hell is
big miss,
that?
you guys. That's a gigantic swing and a miss. Queen Who Never Was. It's a little long to name a boat, but okay, we'll take
It's
it.
very long.
We'll take it. That's a lot of letters to put on the prow of the boat, but maybe you could write small in calligraphy. But this is not a good name of an episode. The Queen Who Ever Was. Like, doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make any damn sense. What are you talking about?
I don't
This
get it.
show. I love this show so much, but this episode is just so frustrating, and it's made even worse by the fact that we're gonna have to wait at least 2 years before we see any more of it. They pitched season 2 as All Out War. They did. They
Mhm.
did that. And now they're pitching season 3 as All Out War.
They definitely did do that. I think it's definitely frustrating. I think that, what's so frustrating to me is I'm very high on the individual episodes of the season, right?
Mhm.
Like, as we've been talking through it, it's been great. But yeah, the pacing and this ending. And again, like, I just have to wonder what happens in these closed rooms where it happens between these executives and these showrunners. It seems like just such a catastrophic miss. And what's so frustrating about it is that you, as an audience member, as a viewer, you want to feel like the show respects your time.
Right.
That's part of what was so infuriating about the end of Game of Thrones. Like, come on, man, after 7 years, like, we're gonna fucking be here for you. We're gonna make you the money. We're gonna go buy the DVDs. Maybe not anymore, but like, just deliver it. Just do the thing. Just do it right. Like, make us feel like you respected our time that we have invested to you. It is literally the most precious commodity we have as humans. And in that way, it can be really frustrating when you feel like a commodity at the end of a television show. Like, oh yeah, they got me. I was the Nielsen viewer every week. I mean, like, they don't actually care about your experience. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, I don't know where it leaves me of like House of the Dragon season 2. I think I still like it better than season 1, but
Mhm.
man, what a frustrating ending.
I definitely still like it better than season 1. I just wish that episode 8 had been something different or
Yep.
had like a different ending. What we got is people marching to war when we were promised all out war and we only got one battle.
Yep. Unfortunate, but nevertheless, LT, that's most of the finale of House of the Dragon season 2 episode 8. We have covered the season in full. Anything that we didn't hit that you would like to before we part ways?
Not really. Other than, are you going to start calling yourself the rich whoever was?
Yeah, I really should. I'm
Okay.
gonna dye my beard blue. I'm gonna start calling myself the rich whoever was, aka Ricario Phildoon. You can call me. That works, right? Ricario Phildoon.
It does.
Um, I may have to go find a Lannister out there somewhere I can mud wrestle with a little bit, but that'll be
Okay.
during the off season. LT, we'll be back in like 2 years, maybe, to talk about season 3 of House of the Dragon. There may be some extra coverage. I may show up with a couple of assorted yahoos, pirate like hooligans that may want to give their 2 cents on the season over the next couple of weeks. A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is going to be coming over to HBO next year. We'll definitely be doing some coverage of that. So keep your eyes out. LT, what do you got going on? Where can people find you out there in the world?
Find me on Twitter at LK Starks, mostly ranting and raving about the Olympics right now. And then catch me on the recap kickback with Chappelle and Mari last week, where we discussed episode 7, the should have been season finale. the season finale, whoever was, of House of the Dragon. That was a lot of fun. And yeah, you'll have to just tune in on Twitter to see what I'm up to next.
You should go do that. I am at DM Philly in all the places, over on Twitch, on YouTube, at Screen Page Pod, or our socials out on the internet. Go check us out on YouTube for upcoming coverage. We got Batman the Caped Crusader. I'm going to be getting together with Kevin Mahadeo to talk about that pretty soon. I think some Deadpool coverage still coming your way. The Lord of the Rings of Power will return at the end of August. Did you see the Vanity Fair photo shoot that came out today of that?
No.
Oh my God. It is simultaneously the most amazing and fabulous photo shoot I've ever seen in my life, and incredibly cringy. And I don't know how they just like ran the line so razor thin, but very interesting. I'll be talking about the Rings of Power with Taylor Ball when it returns. Thank you all for hanging out all season and listening to the two of us talk about House of the Dragon season 2. We will be back someday, but until then, comport yourselves appropriately.